the Slave One was the iconic ship used by both Jango Fett and his son Boba Fett. Over its career, it would venture to nearly every corner of the galaxy, and play a role in many events that would shape the history of the Star Wars galaxy itself. Today we'll take a look at the design and history of this modified Firespray 31 class patrol craft. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. Before I go on, I want to say that there will be some spoilers near the very end of this video for the most recent episode of The Mandalorian, which is Chapter 14, The Tragedy. So if you haven't seen that yet, I'll make it very clear when we're going to start talking about spoilers. So the Slave One is a Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft. Manufactured by Kuat System Engineering, only a few of these vessels were ever built, and at least we know in Legends that only one of them really survived very long, because Jango Fett made it his personal mission to destroy as many of these vessels as he could, in an effort to make his personal ship entirely unique. But even without destroying all of the other ships of the same class, there were a lot of modifications made to this vessel that made it different from basically every other Firespray 31. The most notable modifications are the additional armament that were added to the vehicle. It had a pair of rotating blaster cannons, which we see mounted on sort of the nose of the vehicle, twin laser cannons mounted right below the cockpit, concealed projectile launchers near the very bottom of the vehicle, which we see loaded with things like concussion missiles and proton torpedoes, the iconic seismic charges used during the pursuit through the asteroid field over Geonosis, as well as an ion cannon and a tractor beam. All of that together makes this probably one of the best armed small ships in Star Wars. While the Firespray 31 was technically rated for only carrying 2 people, a pilot, and a passenger, we know that Jango had modified the Slave One to be able to carry a second passenger, probably for bringing in bounties. This could bring the total number of people that could be transported by the Slave One up to 3. In canon, Jango Fett got the ship the only way you would expect him to. He stole it. The vessel was stolen from a compound on Uvo 4, and shortly after it was stolen, it was given the modifications that added most of the weapons that I just mentioned. It was then used as his personal vessel right before the Clone Wars, and would be landed on Kamino when Jango Fett is discovered by ObiWan Kenobi. When Jedi Knight ObiWan Kenobi tried to interrogate the bounty hunter Jango Fett and his clone son Boba Fett, they fled the planet on the modified Firespray 31, and they'd flee to Geonosis, where they'd meet up with Nute Gunray and the rest of the Separatist leadership. However, little did they know that they had been tracked by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who would pursue them to the planet, and would ultimately engage the Slave One in a dogfight in the asteroid rings around Geonosis. Believing he had bested Obi-Wan Kenobi in this dogfight, Jango Fett flew the Slave One down to the surface of the planet and landed it at a Separatist compound. With Jango Fett's death during the Battle of Geonosis, the vessel fell into the ownership of his cloned son, Boba Fett. Over the course of the Clone Wars, it would be used by Boba Fett and a few other bounty hunters, not only to hunt down bounty contracts, but to attempt to find Mace Windu, the Jedi that killed Jango Fett, because Boba wanted revenge. We know that during the Clone Wars, the Slave One briefly fell under the control of Hondo Ohnaka, who was a rather notorious pirate at the time. However, we do know that by the end of the war, it was back in the hands of Boba Fett. During the early years of the reign of the Empire, he would use the vessel for bounty hunting, and it would become somewhat notorious among the criminals of the galaxy as a symbol of a very capable bounty hunter coming to get them. During the Galactic Civil War, it was used by Boba Fett when he was contracted by Darth Vader to attempt to hunt down the Millennium Falcon. After pursuing the Millennium Falcon to Cloud City on Bespin, Boba Fett was able to inform the Empire of the Millennium Falcon's location, and would ultimately end up taking custody of Han Solo, who was wanted by Jabba the Hutt. He would then fly the Slave One to Tatooine, where he would present Han Solo to Jabba the Hutt. Now, before we go on, I am going to start talking about spoilers for the most recent episode of The Mandalorian, which is Chapter 14, The Tragedy. So if you haven't seen that yet and you want to avoid spoilers, consider clicking up here to see my video on the state of the galaxy at the time of The Mandalorian, which is entirely spoiler-free. Anyway, on with the spoilers. So we know that Boba is able to escape the Sarlacc that he falls into in Return of the Jedi, and ultimately survives living on Tatooine. And it seems like the Slave One is still in his possession, because we see it used by Boba Fett to attempt to track down his armor, which has been taken by Din. Boba Fett and his new associate Fennec fly the Slave One to Tython and attempt to confront Din about the armor that he has in his possession. Specifically, by the way, Boba Fett's old armor, not the armor that Din is wearing. We know that following the destruction of the Razor Crest, the Slave One is used by the Mandalorian Boba Fett and Fennec to flee the planet and head to Navarro, where they will continue their mission to pursue Moff Gideon, who is now in possession of the child. That's basically all we know about the Slave One, but I guarantee you we'll see more of it in the coming episodes of The Mandalorian, and I'm excited to see where this ship ends up, because the Slave One is a ship that I've always been very fond of. After all, it was in the original trilogy and the prequels I kind of grew up seeing this ship, so it's nice to see it on screen again in live action. But if you want to learn more about the Razor Crest, I have a video up here that I put out just a few weeks ago about the history and design of that vessel. And I want you to let me know down in the comments what you prefer. Do you prefer the Razor Crest or do you prefer the Slave One? Which one do you think is a better bounty hunting vessel, and which one would you fly if you had to choose one or the other? And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.